experience of the deliberation by Professor Ishan Chakroborti of the Department of English, Jadavpur University, on the call of truth, love, gender, and nation in Rabindranath Thakur's Ghare, Baire. Hope today's talk will make an impression in our strive towards global unity and shun the politics of nationalism. But before that, the person who has already made an impression in her life with her work and has made us feel special with her gracious presence today, she is none other than our Honorable Principal Madam, Dr. Rajyasree Yogi. She always encourages us with her words, work, and her temperament. She always motivates us to do something better and to do something for our students. So, I would not miss the opportunity to request her to share her spirit with all of us. Madam, if you please, say a few words for us.
Thanks, Mr. Dandapate. First of all, on behalf of Vijaygarh Jyotish Ray College, I would like to welcome today's honorable speaker, Dr. Ishan Chakroborti. If I am not wrong, so far I can remember him in KK Das College. I don't know whether he can remember me or not. RN Madam, can you remember me? I know him from a long time. I seen his struggle with mother. Anyway, it's very nice time for me to see him in this platform, and I would be very glad to see him in our college. So I would like to invite you, physically, please come to our college and deliver your valuable lecture to our students. Anyway, I would like to welcome in this virtual platform. This became a culture of Vijaygarh Jyotish Ray College. During the whole year, we have invited many speakers from different corners of the world. I can say that different corner of the world, because this horrible COVID give us this advantage of inviting speaker in this virtual platform. So we are very grateful to the academicians, scholars who made some time from their busy schedule, though virtually, for our students. Anyway, even I don't want to waste internet data by saying quote unquote ajibaje. I would like to congratulate Department of English for organizing this wonderful series. They have organized it earlier also in 2019, 2020, and in 2021 also they are organizing it. And I think that actually the students of these departments are based having of such wonderful faculties, especially their HOD. Anyway, I would like to congratulate them for organizing this webinar. And now you are going to postmortem the Ghare Baire. It's very, very one of my, I can say one of my প্রিয় উপন্যাস যেটা আমি বলতে পারি আর কি. Anyway, once again, I would like to welcome all the participants and our speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam, for your valuable speech. Definitely, your presence means a lot for us, and your encouragement, your motivation always help us to think something different. Now, I would like to request our head of the department, Sir Dr. Ranabil Lahiri, sir, to say a few words, because if Madam is always there with her extending hand to move us ahead, then Sir is the other hand we definitely always would like to hold for our future progress. So, Sir, if you please share your blessings.
Hello, welcome everybody. On behalf of the Department of English, Vijaygarh Jyotish Ray College, we welcome Professor Ishan Chakroborti. It's a privilege to have him as the speaker, and we are really thankful for the time given. A very invigorating session is eagerly awaited. In fact, ever since I read Ghare Baire, and every time I revisit the text, I'm left with a feeling of something waiting to be discovered, waiting to be read anew. Its structural simplicity hides something. No critical lens, no critical discourse, whether of nationalism, of gender and sexuality, of civility and violence, of affectivity and instrumental reason, can ever claim to fully exhaust the text. There is always that sense of hermeneutic surplus, of textual leftover. Though written at a critical juncture, the dialectic between Ghar and Bahir, as hatched by our colonial modernity, has not still left us. We have not been able to resolve the tension. The session to follow, I believe, will further deepen and complicate the tension by foregrounding the themes of love, gender, and nation. So let me hand over the charge to Dev Kumar. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for setting the tone of today's discussion. Definitely, Ishanda would take over from now. But before that, let me give all of you a brief introduction to him. Although a person like Ishanda needs no introduction, still, Ishan Chakraborti is an assistant professor of Department of English, Jadavpur University. He is
কি
presently
বলবে আজকে
pursuing
আজকে
PhD
না কালকে বলছিল কে
from the same department under the supervision of Dr. Ananda Lal. He has been awarded Abul Kashem Ruhimuddin Sammanana Award in 2019 by the government of West Bengal for his contribution in the field of elocution and Bengali poetry recitation. He has also received the State Award for the empowerment of persons with disability in the year 2019 as well, in the category of role model from the government of West Bengal. His areas of interest include Rabindranath Thakur, translation studies, disability studies, body politics, American literature, 19th century English literature. He is one of the coordinators of the Rusha 2.0 project, Bodies of Difference, Pedagogies of the Marginal in the Global South. So, Ishanda, the platform is yours now.
Namaskar. First of all, I think I need to get a clarification. Am I audible and visible? দেখা যাচ্ছে এবং শোনা যাচ্ছে?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you so much. Of course, thank you so much, Dev Kumar. It is very difficult for me to do any sort of formality with Dev Kumar, so I will not try to do that. He's a very dear friend of mine. Thank you so much, Dev Kumar. I would like to thank Professor Rajashree Nyogi for those very kind words, for those very important words, And really, thank you so much for inviting me over to your college to deliver this lecture. I am a little weary of the word lecture. I don't like the word lecture. It appears to me a little daunting. Therefore, let's call it a discussion session for the time being, for all practical purposes, because I want this to be a discussion session and not a mere dry lecture where I'm just going to speak and you're going to listen. Not even most of the times what we do in online mode is we don't even listen. We are just logged in and we do other stuff. So I would want that not to happen in this discussion session. We want to have a meaningful discussion about Ghare Baire. And thank you so much, Professor Lahiri, for those very useful words, for actually making my task much easier by setting out the key points of, laying out the key points of the novel in front of the listeners, the audience. And most importantly, studentদেরকে তো ধন্যবাদ জানাতেই হয় for being here, for agreeing to spare like 1.5 hour to listen to whatever I have to say about Ghare Baire. বিজয়গড় কলেজের সঙ্গে আমার স্মৃতিটা অ্যাকচুয়ালি খুব ইউনিক, and I must share my memories relating to Vijaygarh College. This college happened to be my examination center when I appeared for my final year graduation final year exam. So you can understand how unique my memories are vis-a-vis Vijaygarh College. So yes, thank you so much, ma'am, for inviting me over physically to your college. I would love to visit your college once again, maybe sometime in near future. But coming on to the topic at hand, the topic of discussion, as Dev Kumar has already pointed it out, quote, the call of truth, unquote, love, gender and nation in Rabindranath Thakur's Ghare Baire. Now, there is a slight problem here. See, I do not know what are the things that you have already covered, and I do not know what are the things which you are going to cover in near future. Therefore, it is just going to be this one-off lecture on Ghare Baire. And of course, Ghare Baire being this extremely complex novel, I will not even try to, I will not even claim to deliver any sort of a comprehensive lecture on Ghare Baire in just 1 hour or so. And that's not possible. What I will do is, I'll try to raise a few questions. I'll try to share a few thoughts of mine regarding Ghare Baire with you. And I want your reactions, your comments, your observations on them, right? And I would love to have difference of opinions. I would love to have, you contradicting me, coming and contradicting me. যেখানে মনে হবে আমার মতের সঙ্গে মতের মিল হচ্ছে না, please do not hesitate to stop me, interrupt me. Please come forward with your interventions, interjections, etc. I would love to hear. খালি একটাই সমস্যা, মাইক্রোফোনটা একটু যদি মিউট করে রাখা যায় তাহলে সব দিক থেকেই সুবিধা, যারা শুনছেন তাদের পক্ষেও। আবার আমি অ্যাকচুয়ালি আমার কিছুই অসুবিধা না, একটাই অসুবিধা, I always get very excited when someone unmutes himself or herself, because I always think that he or she has something to say. So that is a problem. Otherwise, অন্য কোনো সমস্যা নেই, and I will try to keep my lecture bilingual. Of course, this is a lecture organized by the Department of English, and I'm expected to deliver the entire lecture in English, which I will do definitely. And also here, I understand that most of the students are from English honors background, etc. So of course, the need of the hour, as it were, is to deliver the lecture in English. But since my primary text is Bangla, therefore I will have to come back to Bangla from time to time. Okay, so those were the prologue, a rather lengthy prologue, Gaur Chandrika. Now let me come directly to the point of discussion. As you can see, I do not have any PowerPoint presentation. I have no script. It's just me, my thoughts, my reading of Ghare Baire, my readings of Ghare Baire, Rabindranath, and most importantly, you and your thoughts, your comments on Ghare Baire. Now, before I start, I think the title of today's lecture, talk, discussion, whatever it is, that needs to be elucidated, that needs to be explained, to be elaborated a little. Now, There are four important words in this title, and they are rather, what should I say? They are rather exciting, interesting, and enticing words. These are rather enticing words. We tend to use these words quite often, but we often tend to overlook its multifarious meanings. Truth, nation, love, and gender. Now, truth, in Rabindranath Tagore and Rabindranath Tagore's literary, philosophical, political, musical output, truth is present in an all-pervasive manner, as it were, right? Rabindranath is always talking about truth, various kinds of truth. He's talking about various kinds of truth. He's talking about truth in various contexts, as it were. And here we have three contexts, three immediate contexts to analyze, to understand the meanings of truth, right? It might sound a little counterintuitive because আমরা জানি সত্য একটি, ধ্রুব সত্য, একটি সত্য, one, truth is one, it's singular. But as and when we move on with the lecture, we'll see that it's not so, especially in a person like Tagore, who is so complex in his literary output, in his philosophical understanding of the world. Truth is actually multidimensional, it is evolving, it is very complex. And we have three contexts at hand: nation, love, and gender, to understand the meaning of truth. But I will come to these three contexts in a minute. Before that, I think I need to set out the general background of Ghare Baire. I understand that you people have, I think most of you have already read Ghare Baire. Maybe you people have studied Ghare Baire in your class. You have already engaged in other lectures. But please bear with me, maybe first 4 or 5 minutes, just to begin with the background of Ghare Baire. Now, Ghare Baire was, of course, getting published, the dates of Ghare Baire, 1915-16, right? Shobuj Patra Potrika, that is sort of the journal in which, periodical to be precise, in which Ghare Baire was getting published. The original Bengali novel was getting published. In Bengali, it is 1322 Bangabdo. So it would be 1915 to 1916. And in the form of a book, it was getting published, or it got published in 1916. Interestingly, the novel gets translated into English by Surendranath Tagore, and of course, Tagore approved of the translation. Tagore himself made quite a few corrections. He reviewed the translation, and finally, the translation got Tagore's approval. And the translation was getting published in the Modern Review in 1918-19. And in the form of a book, it got published in 1919. Of course, the year is very familiar to you for, of course, reasons which you already know: Jallianwala Bagh massacre, Tagore returning his knighthood, etc. Tagore protesting against that massacre, etc. Now, those are the dates, really. But what is happening in general as far as Ghare Baire is concerned? Ghare Baire as a novel is unique because of its form. And I think I must throw some light on the form before I actually get into the discussion of Ghare Baire and its relationship with nature, its engagement with nation, gender, and love. Ghare Baire's form ta nishoy, of course, this is quite ostensible, this is quite obvious. You can see a series of autobiographies. In Bengali, Banglay kothata ache attokotha. Bimalaর আত্মকথা, নিখিলেশের আত্মকথা, সন্দীপের আত্মকথা. However, in the English translation, we have the word story. Vimala's story, Nikhilesh's story, and Shandip's story. I'll come to these two words in a moment. But this particular form, where the characters, the protagonists of a novel, they are telling their own stories. They are writing journal entries, diary entries, as if. This is a form which Tagore and most of the scholars, most of the critics, etc., they have agreed on this, that Tagore was taking this from Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay's Rajani, a novel which was published in 1877-78. In Rajani, we find again a series of autobiographies, as it were, autobiographical entries, journal entries by characters like Rajani, who is a blind flower girl, Amarnath, Shochindro, Lolita Lobongolata, and so on. So the characters are narrating their own story. This is a very conventional way of understanding Ghare Baire's form. But here, I would argue that it is not a straightforward movement from Rajani to Ghare Baire. Ghare Baire is not another replication of the form of Rajani. This is my first contention. Why? What's the difference? In both the novels, we have the protagonists narrating their own stories. And as if sort of we have separate chapters, but these are not really chapters. These are separate diary entries by the characters, by the protagonists of the novel. Then where is the difference? Rajani follows a linear narrative structure. Rajani ends her story. Shochindra begins from where Rajani ends. Shochindra ends his story. Amarnath begins from where Shochindra left. So it is a straight linear progression of narrative. In Ghare Baire, we do not find this simplistic, straight, linear progression of narrative. In fact, what we find is a network of narratives. What do I mean by that? There are certain occasions, there are certain events in the novel where we see one event is getting narrated by, described by multiple characters. That is to say, in Ghare Baire, we actually have multiple points of view. We do not merely have multiple narrators. In Rajani, it was a mere multiple narrators. In Ghare Baire, we actually have multiple points of view. One particular event is being described from multiple perspectives. Let me elaborate. I believe most of you are familiar with the novel at least. নিশ্চয়ই সবাই পড়েছো বা আপনারা সবাই পড়েছেন। You will definitely remember that very crucial moment in Ghare Baire where Bimola falls at Nikhilesh's feet. She's crying very bitterly. She's repentant. She takes Nikhilesh's feet and presses her breasts to those feet. I'm sure you all remember that particular episode. That episode, that event, has been narrated from at least two perspectives. From the perspective of Nikhilesh, from the perspective of Bimola. Bimola says, "Ami peyechi, ami amar shamir ashirwad peyechi." And Nikhilesh comes and stands. He sees Bimola is crying. He sits. He puts his hand on Bimola's head, and etc., etc. So one particular event being actually described from multiple perspectives, multiple points of view. This is where Ghare Baire is different from Rajani. So definitely Tagore had a precedence. Tagore had something to follow, but Tagore was invoking it and yet making certain very important changes as far as the very form of the novel is concerned. The Bangla novel, Bangla Ghare Baire, the novel, original novel, is the first novel written in Cholit, is the first novel by Tagore written in Cholit Bhasha. Before that, before this Ghare Baire, we have several other novels of Tagore, and there are occasions where Tagore uses Cholit Bhasha in his novels, but for the sake of dialogues. The entire novel is not in Cholit Bhasha. This is the first novel in Bangla by Tagore, which is entirely in Cholit Bhasha. In 1914, there is another very interesting short story getting published in the same Shobuj Patra Patrika. The name of the short story, I'm sure all of you are familiar with the short story, Strir Patra. Again, that is the first short story by Rabindranath, which is entirely in Charit Bhasha. Also, the novel, also the short story, Strir Patra, is one where we find the woman scripting herself, the woman narrating her own story, the woman writing her own story, the woman holding her pen and writing her own story. Now, of course, the late 19th century literary milieu will have much to contribute to this, because women in the late 19th century were actually writing their autobiographies, right? They were writing their autobiographies, they were publishing their autobiographies, they were making their private life public, as it were. So Tagore had that precedence, and Tagore is using that to write a short story like Strir Patra, where we have the voice of a woman in the first person, where we have Ghare Baire, where we have the woman and the two men narrating their own stories. Right. So this is the first point which I wanted to make about Ghare Baire. Now, the movement from Ghare Baire to the home and the world. Now, of course, you will be studying the home and the world, because I think that is the one which is prescribed in your syllabus. I think UG3 syllabus. But you must be aware of the fact, you must remain conscious of the fact that these are actually not interchangeable texts. Again, I would refer to Tapabroto Ghosh, Professor Tapabroto Ghosh. He, in his essay, The Form of the Home and the World, notes that these are actually very different texts. While Ghare Baire is more character-centric, the home and the world is more plot-centric. Plot takes or plot is situated before the characters in the home and the world. The plot is more important than the characters in the home and the world. However, once we read Ghare Baire, we will understand that the plot is only a backdrop, is only a context. And it's a context against which the characters are developed. Bimala, Shondeep, and Nikhilesh are developed. Now, also, you would note that from Atmakatha, we go to story. It's not an autobiography. In the English, the home and the world, you will see the word is not autobiography. It's not Bimala's autobiography, Nikhil's autobiography, Shondeep's autobiography, but it is merely Bimala's story, Nikhil's story, Shondeep's story, as if in the English text, as if a masterful author is looming somewhere out there, as if a masterful author is keeping his eyes on the movements, on the actions of the characters. However, in the Bengali texts, we do not have any such masterful eyes, any such surveillant author keeping an eye on the actions and the development of the characters. They are actually speaking their heart out. They are not even bothered whether they are repeating the same episode or not. This is very interesting. In Rajani, this is where Ghare Baire stands apart from Rajani. In Rajani, we do not have repetition of the same event. In Ghare Baire, we do have such events. We do have such occasions where the same event is being repeated, but from various perspectives, from various points of view. Yeah. So those were basically the context and the form. But I am supposed to talk about the truth, nation, love, and gender. And as I move on, you will be able to note that the form, the discussion on the form, is not entirely irrelevant in the context of the truth, the nation, gender, and their engagement with love. Now, Ghare Baire as a novel, it drew terrible criticism from the contemporary readers, from the contemporary critics, and various kinds of criticism, to be precise. The nationalists were the extremist nationalists, so to speak, the nationalists of the extremist kind. They were terribly upset with a novel like Ghare Baire, for they found it to be some kind of a compromise with the imperial rule. The Bengali orthodoxy was severely offended by the depiction of the adulterous relationship and also the discourses on sexuality. They were particularly offended. The conservative Bengali orthodoxy was particularly offended by the fact that a woman was discussing sexuality so openly in the public, and that too, sexuality, eroticism vis-a-vis the lover and not the husband, or both the lover and the husband. The adulterous relationship which is being discussed so openly by the woman, that appeared to be something terrible to the Bengali orthodoxy. George Lukács is a name I think you are most of you are familiar with. Now, George Lukács, if I may quote his words, he describes Ghare Baire as a petty bourgeois yarn of the shoddiest kind. Very strong words. He is not even willing to call, or he's not even ready to call Ghare Baire a novel. He calls it a yarn. A yarn is a longish, implausible tale, right? As opposed to a novel, and that too of a quote unquote of the shoddiest kind, as it were. Therefore, you can understand that Ghare Baire drew various kinds of criticism. It offended various kinds of people, as it were. Feminists find Ghare Baire extremely offensive, very regressive, very patriarchal, etc. The traditional feminists, they found Ghare Baire very difficult to deal with, because here we have a typical woman who moves from the domestic sphere to the world, to the outside, and then she is tamed and she returns back to the domestic sphere, to her husband. It is often seen as just another roman à trois, R-O-M-A-N, roman à trois. A novel, roman is novel, a novel about a triangulated love story. But as we'll see, that it is not merely a roman à trois, it's not merely a petit bourgeois yarn, it is not merely a novel where Bimala from her husband goes to Shondeep, she learns a lesson over there, she's taught a lesson over there, she's tamed and she comes back to her husband, she's punished and she comes back to her husband, the domestic sphere, as it were. It's not merely that, it's more than that. And for that, we'll come to the discussion on nationalism. Now, Tagore's engagement with nationalism is so deep, so vast, so complex, and of course, just only this topic, Rabindranath Tagore and his nationalism, this topic itself deserves a series of at least 4 lectures, as it were, full-length lectures. Now, of course, I will not try to cram all things in a lecture of 1 hour or so, but just to touch upon a few very important points which I think must be raised in order to understand the novel's engagement with nation and nationalism. Now, Tagore's ideas of nationalism evolved. This is something which we must keep in mind right at the outset. Right? Tagore's ideas of nationalism were not static, that is to say. Tagore, around 1905, or in the years leading up to 1905, Tagore was fairly visible in the political sphere. Tagore was participating in this anti-partition movements, as it were, partition of Bengal. Of course, I'm talking about the announcement of the partition of Bengal by Lord Curzon in 1905. Tagore took to streets. Tagore engaged himself in a self-fashioning, as it were, which portrayed him as one of the important faces of anti-partition movement. Rakhi Bandhan Utsav, the rituals that Tagore was engaging in, the songs that he was writing, for example, Aji Bangladesher Hridoy Hote Kokhon Aponi, O Amar Desher Mati Tomar Pore Thekai Matha, Banglar Mati Banglar Jol, Amar Sonar Bangla, all of these were written around the same time, Bhadro Ashwin, 1905, Bhadro Ashwin. Around the same time, these songs were getting written in different periodicals, in different journals, as it were. But what we see, we have to understand that a discourse of nationalism was already available to Tagore. And that discourse was primarily constructed, and I will here primarily focus on one particular text, and that is Anandamot. এখানে নিশ্চয়ই তোমরা সকলে বা অধিকাংশই তোমরা এখানে আনন্দমঠ পড়েছো। Do you all understand Bangla? Do you want this lecture to be exclusively in English, or do you want me to be bilingual? It is up to you. See, I mean, I am going to lecture and you're going to listen and just go back. I don't want that. I want some participation. I want some meaningful interaction, as it were. If you want me to be a little expressive in Bangla, that's all right.
So what if you are comfortable with? Like, I am comfortable in Bengali also, in English also. If you tell in Bengali,
Okay,
it's good.
Okay, fine. I understand that most
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. I understand that most of you are familiar with Anandamot, right? Now, in Anandamot, there is a construction of a nationalism which we might call the militant nationalism, the Hindu nationalism, right? And I would want you to look at one particular song, of course, the song which you all know, Vande Mataram, Vande Mataram. And if you look at these few lines, Twang hi Durga Dashapraharana Dharinim, Kamala Kamala Dala Biharinim, Vani Vidya Dainim, Namami Twang. Right? You are Durga, wielding 10 weapons. You are Kamala, the one on lotus. You are Vani Vidya Dainim, you are Saraswati, who is the goddess of speech and knowledge, right? Namami Twang. That is how in Anandamot, the nation, the country was constructed. Deshomatrika and Durga, Devi and Desh were conflated very deliberately in Anandamot. Anandamot is a particular peak, as it were. So I'm just taking Anandamot into consideration. There were many other factors which led up to Anandamot. Anandamot is a separate discussion altogether. It has its own background, it has its own contexts, etc. I'm not going into that those details, as it were, here. Now, and also you will remember jara jara ekhane Anandamot porecho, that very interesting scene where Shotanando makes Mohendro take a tour of the mott, as it were, and he shows, Dakho Maja Chilen, what the mother was, Maja Hoyachen, what the mother is, Maja Hoiben, what our mother will be. And there we saw the images of Jagodhatri, of Kali who is absolutely naked and hungry and everything, and we have Durga with her 10 weapons, with her children and everything, right? Saraswati, Lokhi, Kartik, Ganesh, everything. So Durga, the entire image of Durga. Therefore, what Tagore had in front of him is an icon of Desh, and of course, you will remember Rabindranath and other people who were sketching Deshomatrika, etc. The sketch of Desh Mata, etc. Bharat Mata, all those sketches will be there in your mind. I think I should have brought at least one of those pictures to show. but clearly a conflation, an integration, Deshamatrika and Devi. Tagore moves away from this simplistic conflation. But this movement is not very straightforward. It is a little jolty, as it were, right? There's one particular song, I have mentioned the song already, Aji Bangladesher Hridoy Hote Kokhon Apuni. In that particular song, there is a stanza, Dan hate tor khorgo jole, bahat kore shonka horon, dui noyoni sneher hashi, lolat netro agun boron, ogo ma, tomar ki muroti achi dekhire. Clearly, Tagore is also invoking that same image of the Devi, of the mother goddess, which was available. But, and here where Tagore moves a few steps forward, he does not restrict himself, or he does not restrict his ideas of nation merely to the image of the mother goddess. Rather, we will see that he dissolves this image, / he will eventually reject this image. By the time we come to Ghare Baire, by the time we come to Shondeep, Nikhilesh and their debate, and Bimala coming in, etc., we'll see Tagore strongly critiquing this neat conflation of the mother goddess with the nation. Worshipping nation. This is something that Tagore rejects. Tagore says, I will worship my God, my Devota, who is beyond my nation. Amar Devota, Amar Desher Upore. I will not worship my nation. I will worship my God, and my God is beyond my nation. But I'll come to that in a moment. In Bangladesher Hridoy Hote, towards the end of the song, you will get Dukhini Ma. Dukhini Ma. In Shonar Bangla, again, the golden Bengal, as it were, if you can translate it that way, in O Amar Desher Mati Tomar Pore Thakai Matha, you will find Tagore, nowhere is Tagore using the image of the goddess again. In fact, Tagore has moved forward. O Amar Desher Mati Tomar Pore Thakai Matha, Tomate Bishwomoyi, Tomate Bishwomayer Achol Pata. Therefore, Tagore is not merely restricting the image of his nation to a Hindu icon. He is taking it a few steps forward, nay, many steps forward, and he is conflating it with the universal. Bishwomoyi, Bishwomayer Achol Pata. I am going to respect my country because here I see a reflection of the universal. If you can, if we do a little bit of fast forward, and if we could go to the poem Bharat Tirtho, I think it was written around 1911-12. Maybe one of you can rectify me if I'm wrong. The exact date I don't remember. It's 1911-12, something around that. In Bharat Tirtho, এই ভারতের মহামানবের সাগর তীরে, what Professor Amrit Sen observes, here we have an imaginary of a quote, oceanic humanity, right? দিবে আর নিবে মিলাবে মিলিবে যাবে না ফিরে. It is the universal that Tagore is trying to imagine in his nation, in his idea of the country. What Tagore is rejecting is the militant nationalism, is the nationalism which is constructed on the edifice of violence, which is constructed on the edifice of exploitation, of exclusion, and aggression. And where Tagore is extremely weary of a nation which is nothing but a mere political machine, political machinery, which has converted itself into political machinery. Tagore is extremely weary of that nation and that form of nationalism. In Bharat Tirtho, we clearly see Tagore addressing at least 3 or 4 very important issues at hand. When we often recite Bharat Tirtho, right? Hemorchitto punno tirthe jagore dhire, etc. It's a very favorite poems with the elocutionists. But we forget to think of a few points. Tagore is talking about all sorts of religions coming together. Christianity, Christian, Musalman, Hindu, Parashik, Jaino, Bauddha, etc. All of them are coming together in Bharat Tirtho. Bharat Tirtho, pilgrimage, pilgrim, Bharat Tirtho. We have Purbo Poshchim coming together and standing beside the Ashon of Bharat, of the Desh, right? Purbo and Poshchim, East and West coming together. And there is another very important moment where Tagore says, Esho Brahman Shuchi Kori Mon. Tagore is also addressing the question of casteism. He's saying that Potito has also must also be included in the project of nation building. In Tagore's imaginary, the nation is not a Hindu nation. It cannot be, it could not be a mere Hindu nation. Therefore, Tagore is also rejecting that icon which associates itself only with the Hindus, as it were, the mother goddess, as it were. Tagore is rejecting that. Tagore is moving forward. Tagore had used it, but Tagore evolves. In fact, I was having a very interesting conversation with Amrit Da the other day. Of course, by the way, Professor Amrit Sen is a professor of the Department of English, Vijaygarh University. I was having a discussion with Amrit Da the other day. He made a very interesting comment. I would want to throw this comment at you and you can think about it. I am going to think about it for myself. That in Ghare Baire, a movement from Shondip to Nikhilesh is a movement that Tagore embarked himself. Tagore himself underwent this journey from being Shondip to being Nikhilesh. Of course, I think Amrit Da was overstating a few things. From Shondip is one extreme and Nikhilesh is another. But of course, Nikhilesh is no doubt, he is in many ways the mouthpiece of Tagore, in many, many ways. But we often make this difference. We see Nikhilesh directly as another alter ego of Tagore. I think that is, of course, unfounded. We have no reason to understand or read Nikhilesh as a straightforward alter ego of Tagore. We should not do that. But definitely he is a mouthpiece of Tagore, right? And Nikhilesh clearly rejects that Mohishamurdinir Bandana, right? Vande Matarang, that slogan itself does not appeal to Nikhilesh, right? Bandana korbo ami, amar devotake bandana korbo, amar ishwarke bandana korbo. I'm going to worship my God and not my desh, right? Okay, so much about what Tagore was critiquing in nationalism: militant nationalism, religious nationalism, devotional nationalism, nationalism founded on the edifice of exclusion, etc., etc. All right, fine. But what was Tagore offering as an alternative? Constructive nationalism. What kind of construction? Rural reconstruction. And here I'm going to again present a very interesting, important poem in front of you. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the poem, John Mantar. Ami ছেড়েই দিতে রাজি আছি সুসভ্যতার আলোক, আমি চাই না হতে নববঙ্গে নবযুগের চালক, আমি নাইবা গেলাম বিলাত, etc. যদি ননি ছানার গায়ে কোথাও অশোক নিপের ছায়ে, আমি কোন জন্মে পারি হতে ব্রজের গোপ বালক, তবে চাই না হতে নববঙ্গে নবযুগের চালক. What he is returning to is a rural reconstruction, a country which is made of self-sustaining, economically independent, self-reliant. I put the word self-reliant within quotes because it has many implications in the present context. Self-reliant villages, as it were, which does not depend on, or which does not thrive on the relationship of exploitation. Tagore is extremely wary of this urbanization which thrives on exploitation of the villages, exploitation of nature. Right? For example, in a play like Rakto Karabi, 1926, Tagore will heavily, strongly critique this urbanization, this greed, this aggression, as it were, this amassment of wealth on the one hand, and on the other hand, you have পৌষের গান, পৌষ তোদের ডাক দিয়েছে, মাঠের বাঁশি শুনে শুনে আকাশ খুশি হলো, ঘরেতে আজকে রবে গো, খোলো খোলো দুয়ার, etc. Therefore, what Tagore, and by the way, Tagore was not putting this forward merely in terms of theory. He himself tried it out in practical terms, right? In his Sriniketan project is something which you will definitely remember. In Shurul, around 1911, 1912, Tagore was starting his Sriniketan project. He was sending one of his sons abroad to study agriculture. He's trying to promote cooperative banks. He's trying to promote scientific dairy farming. He's trying to educate the illiterate villagers, farmers. Holkorshon Utsav. He's promoting something called Holkorshon Utsav. So farming, agriculture, this is something, self-sustaining economy of the villages is something that Tagore is putting forward as an alternative to the devotional nationalism. And this is what I would want to call the creative nationalism, the constructive nationalism. Creativity is an extremely important word, and it's a cooperative bank, homemade or country-made deshlai, matchsticks, clothes, and all sorts of cottage industries that Nikhilesh is engaging himself. I think you will remember all those rural reconstruction projects that Nikhilesh is experimenting with, as it were, right? So Nikhilesh is really an experimenter, if I may use such a word. Quote-unquote experimenter in many senses. He's experimenting with the idea of the nation, and in a moment I'll show you that he's also experimenting with the ideas of gender, with the ideas of conjugality. I'll come to that in a moment. But just returning back to the idea of creativity, সৃজনশীলতা, গড়ে তোলা, Nikhilesh is saying, Nikhilesh is telling Bimala, ধ্বংস করবার কাজে এতটুকু শক্তি ক্ষয় করো না, গড়ে তোলবার কাজে নিজের সবটুকু শক্তি লাগাও. I'm not quoting verbatim, of course I don't have the text in front of me, but those were more or less the words when Bimala is insisting that, come on, burn all those foreign goods. I mean, why aren't you indulging yourself in those bonfires, those visual spectacles? This is what more or less Nikhilesh is saying. Creativity is an important word in Tagore's idea of nationalism, and this is one of the important points on which Tagore and Gandhi debated. I will not enter into Tagore debate here. Of course, you can read it up for yourself. I think Shobhashachi Bhattacharya has a full-length book, Mahatma and the Poet. It's very useful. I think you can always go back to the book to read it up for yourself. But one of the things that Tagore is saying is, I will not spend half an hour in spinning charkha, because that is a mindless work that has no creative energy involved. It is just a mechanical work. It is just a mere attempt to convert all your citizens into mechanical machine-like followers. I will not participate in that juggernaut, as it were, right? I am a creative being. I have a mind with which I can think. I will create something new. I will just not participate in what everybody is doing, right? This is one of the very important, so therefore individual creativity is something that Tagore is focusing on. Ghare tolar kache, construction, creativity. Of course, Tagore was a poet. Of course, you can understand. So he will have a lot to say about creativity and construction. Now, so this is more or less, these are the things that I needed to tell you about nation. But just to end my discussion on nation, and therefore you can see that there are many truths available on nation, and they're all there in front of you in the novel itself. You have a version of Shondeep, which is a version of nation and nationalism of Shondeep, which is entirely founded on aggression, on desire, on loot, on violence, etc., right? On coercion, etc. On the other hand, you have Nikhilesh's version of nationalism, which is dependent on, which is founded on inclusion, the idea of inclusion. Tagore, in one of his essays, very interestingly states the problem. I think the title of the essay is Nationalism in India. I mean, these are all lectures that he was delivering in America in 1916, a series of lectures, as it were. In one of these lectures, he begins the lecture by stating that the problem in India is not political, it is social. And Tagore says that a mere political freedom will do us no good if we as a country remain weak from within. Racism, communalism, casteism, gender inequality, classism, all these factors together, and of course, most importantly, lack of education, illiteracy, together they form a vicious circle, and our nation has been weakened by these social evils. We need to address these social evils first before we even think of getting rid of the British rule. A mere political freedom will not do us any good. But that is not to suggest that Tagore was promoting imperialism. Please don't get me wrong. That is not what I want to say. Okay. Now, also, for example, Jana Gana Mana, of course, the first stanza is our national anthem, but as you most of you know, it's a longish, the lengthy song, right? Song of 5 stanzas together. Even in Jana Gana Mana, Tagore is talking about, I think in the second stanza, if I'm not very wrong, Tagore is talking about various religions, Christiani, Jaino, Bauddha, Parashik, Hindu, and all the religions coming together. In the 4th stanza, very interestingly, Tagore is addressing Bharata Bhagya Vidhata as Tumi Snehomoyi Mata. And in the last stanza, he's again referring to Rajeshwar. So it's very interesting how Tagore also was dealing with the idea of gender in his understanding of nation. And this is something which I'll come to in a moment. And this brings me to the discussion on gender. As I told you, feminists found this text extremely problematic. They saw Bimala as a very typical woman who is split into 2 men, and the men construct her subjectivity. She sees herself through the lens of the men, and the men both the men are trying to construct Bimala in their own ways. It's not entirely wrong. This interpretation is not entirely wrong, but there is more to it. There are other layers of nuances, as it were, to this interpretation of Ghare Baire. Tonika Sarkar makes a very important observation. It's a very important observation. Femininity and masculinity in Ghare Baire, in the home and the world, are experimented with. I was talking about Nikhilesh experimenting with the idea of nation, but he's also experimenting with the idea of gender. And this is what Tonika Sarkar points out. Nikhilesh undergoes the experience of, quote, feminine biroho, just like feminine biroho, unquote, just like Radha. That would be my interpolation. That would be my addition, as it were. If you can think of that particular chapter, when Nikhilesh at least 4 or 5 times he repeats that refrain, Ebharabadara Mahabhadara Shunya Mandir Mo. Of course, if you go back, I'm sure most of you have heard the song. Tagore scored the song, by the way. If you just can recall the first few lines, it's a pada, or it's a lyric pod by Vidyapati. He sakhi hamari dukher nahi or, ebhara badar mahabhadar shunya mandir mor, jhampi khanagar janti santati bhuvan bhari bari khantiya kant pahna kam daruna saghane kharashar khantiya. Or in Tagore's version, kant pahna virah daruna saghane kharashar khantiya, etc. It is Radha who is saying these words to her friend, to her whatever, Lolita or Vishakha, to one of her friends, as it were. One of her shokhis, not friend. Friend is a different word. To one of her shokhis, as it were. He sakhi hamari dukher nahi. This is the refrain that Nikhilesh is chanting. Nikhilesh undergoes the experience of biroho. And this is what Tonika Sarkar argues. Masculinity in this novel is questioned, is analyzed from various perspectives, from various directions. We have one version of masculinity, the very virile masculinity, a masculinity which is always, quote, blazing, unquote. And I use the word blazing very deliberately because fire imagery is repeatedly used in Shondip's autobiography, and also in the sections where Shondip is talking about Bimala, for example, or Bimala is thinking about Shondip, etc. So on the one hand, we have that blazing virility of Shondip, and on the other hand, we have, quote, viraha being experienced by Nikhilesh. It's not a woman who is experiencing viraho, but it is a man who is experiencing viraho, as it were. And not only that, towards the end of that very important chapter, what Nikhilesh says, Kishe tomar mondir shunno holo. And then he says a few words, and finally he ends it by saying, Shotto amar mondir bhore dao, amar shunno mondir bhore dao. He asks, or he requests, quote, truth to come and fill in his empty house. He wants to have Shotto. He does not want a Bimala who is made up of a mere illusion. Nikhilesh understands, he realizes that he wanted to construct a Bimala. He wanted to construct a, quote, modern woman, as it were, with shamis, with one particular kind of sari, shoes, taking lessons from Miss Gilby, reading English books, reading English poems, piling up her hair in a particular manner. That very interesting line, Moshaler Shikha, Kalo Shikha, her khopa is being described, her pile of hair is being described as the black flames of the torch. So this entire construct of Bimala was only an illusion, because Nikhilesh himself says that I myself, I veiled Vimala's vision. Vimala's vision was veiled by me. Now I am going to give Vimala, or Vimala should get a choice to choose from, as it were. And it is at that particular juncture that he experiences viraha, he experiences, or he feels that his mandir is shunno, and therefore he wants truth to come and fill in that house. Shondip's truth is the truth of Ichhe, desire. Ichhe is a word that Shondip repeatedly uses in his autobiography. We know how to want, how to desire. That is the version of truth that Shondip is sort of putting forward, as it were. Right. Now coming to Bimala. Bimala, Shondip. Of course, Bimala can be, seen as that poor woman, the woman who is tamed, etc. But Shondip again tries to construct a version of Bimala. And what is that version of Bimala? By conflating Bimala with nation, with the country. Interestingly enough, and this is what many scholars have noted, in Ghare Baire, this is something which I would want to place in front of you. Ghare Baire is a novel where we do not have, it is, Ghare Baire as a novel is about a political movement whose central mantra was Vande Mataram, Hail Mother. But interestingly, Ghare Baire is a novel where we do not have any real children. Bimala is not a mother. Bimala and Nikhilesh, they have been married for like last 9 years, as it were. That is what the novel tells us. They've been married for 9 years, but they are childless. Bimala is childless. I would want to argue that here Tagore had a problem. Tagore had a problem in dealing with a mother who is leaving behind her children and going out to her lover. A mother leaving her children and going out to her lover is something that Tagore could not grapple with. Tagore could not deal with. Bimala, to be precise, is no Nora. Bimala is not an Ibsenian Nora. Tagore could not make her Bimala an Ibsenian Nora. Right? But that is not to suggest that Bimala does not experience motherhood. We have a, quote, childlike character, a surrogate child, as it were, in the novel, and that is Amullo. The relationship between Bimala and Amullo will remind us, or will bring it closest to the relationship between a mother and her child. In most of these novels where Tagore, or in all of these novels where Tagore deals with this trio, as it were, man, woman, man, woman, man, man, woman, man, woman, whatever. I mean, whatever combination you can think of. Chokher Bali. Chokher Bali is, of course, a response to Bishop Brikho. You have Chokher Bali. You have Ghare Baire. You will have, in future, you will have Sheshir Kobita. And there, all these characters, you will have some kind of a throa. You will have Tagore dealing with some kind of a throa. And in none of these novels, we have any reference to children. The sexuality of the mother is something that Tagore had difficulty in dealing with. And therefore, he very carefully, consciously evades that identity of Bimala. When Bimala comes closest to the experience of motherhood, she actually experiences two motherhoods. One is the motherhood, or the mother who is conflated with nation. And this is the construct of Shondip. I will come to that in a moment. Bimala herself will critique that version of mother as well. But the other motherhood that she is experiencing when she comes closest to Amullo, it is also that very moment when she returns, when she realizes, when she becomes aware, as it were, when she comes closest to her version of truth. Amulya brings her to the closest, to her version of truth, as it were. Now, Bimala, at one point of time, you will remember, Bimala says that this nation that I am seeing in front of me, that I have been conflated with, that nation is no mother. That is a Priya, a Preyoshi. It is a land of the Vaishnava poets. Her only intention, her only aim is the Obhishar. She has heard a call from somewhere. কোথাও থেকে একটা ডাক শুনেছে, সে তার সব ফেলে দিয়ে, ঘর ফেলে দিয়ে, সে তার সবকিছু ফেলে দিয়ে, সে ছুটে বেরিয়ে পড়েছে। এ তো প্রেয়সীর অভিসারিকার দেশ। এ দেশ মায়ের দেশ নয়, মাতৃভূমি নয়, এ ভূমি প্রেয়সীর। Shandip makes a similar comment. He transforms the mantra Vande Mataram to Vande Priyam. Hail Mother to Hail Beloved. Therefore, the conflation that happens, transforming or imagining Bimala as a mother, that actually takes a step forward, that gets a little distorted, as it were. Or if distorted is a more pejorative word, let's replace it with the word transform. That gets transformed into the conflation of Bimala, the individual woman, with the conflation of the image of the beloved and nation. Tagore had difficulty in resolving the quote binary of Kalyanamoyi Lokhi and Urboshi, the seductress and the mother. Tagore had very severe problem in resolving these binary images, as it were. Now, of course, feminists will find this problematic, and I too find this very problematic, no doubt about it. Tagore, on many occasions, Tagore makes this bifurcation, as it were. On the one hand, we have the Kalyanamoyi Lokhi, we have the Mata, Matrika, etc. On the other hand, we have Preyoshi, we have Premika, we have Urboshi, who is all about Kamona, who is all about seduction and everything, right? Dev Kumar, could you just let me know, I mean, what's the time? Do I have time?
Yes. Please continue because
okay, thank you.
Time.
Now, interestingly enough, I will not continue for long because I would want you to react, you to come up with your views, your whatever observations, comments, etc. So just a few more points to add, really. This is a novel, and I have argued that this is a novel where the mother, the Vande Mataram, is converted, is transformed into Vande Priyam. Bimala critiques the conflation of the mother with her own identity, with her subjectivity, etc. She sees a Preyoshi, she sees this as a country of the Vaishnava poets, that Radha is no mother. And this is something which Arjun Dev Sen Sharma, in one of his lectures, points out. I think he's a professor of comparative literature, Silchar University, if I'm not very wrong. He, in one of his lectures, pointed it out that Radha could not be a mother. Radha could have never been made into a mother. Anyway, so that is one point. That is one part of my argument. But as I told you, Ghare Baire resists any simplistic interpretation, as it were. Any simplistic interpretation, as it were. The novel starts with, Upanyashta shuru hoy with a recollection of the mother, with a recapitulation of the mother's beauty. Mayer সিঁদুর সিথির সিঁদুর, আজ আমার মনে পড়ছে মায়ের মাথার শিশির, কপালের শিশির সিঁদুর, শিশিরের ফোঁটা, etc. The vermilion mark on Vimala's mother's forehead, right? It is very interesting. It is this context with which the novel begins. We have Bimala we have Bimala, who is motherless, who is childless, sorry, who is not a mother. She is being converted into a mother by Nikhilesh, by Shondeep, I'm so sorry, by Shondeep. Her identity is being conflated with that of the mother nation, with that of Twang Hi Durga Dashapraharanadharinim, Kamala Kamala Dalabiharinim, Vani Vidyadainim, etc. In fact, Shondeep wants to organize this Durga Pujo in one of these village markets, as it were. In the estate of Nikhilesh, if you remember that particular portion. And then Bimala herself understands that no, this is a transformed, this is a fallacious ideation of mother, fallacious imagining of the mother. And then she moves a step forward and she says, no, I am no mother. This desh is no desh of mother. This is a desh of the lover, of the beloved, of the Obhisharika, as it were, and then Shondeep, and then Amullo, and then Bimala coming closest to her version of truth. So from the perspective of motherhood, as it were, Bimala and her engagement with the identity of the mother, as it were, we have a very significant, very unique construct of Bimala's identity, of Bimala's subjectivity herself. Now, quickly coming to the idea of love. Yes, any question?
Hello, sir.
Yes, hi.
Sir, when was Ghare Baire published? In 1916, am I right?
1915-16, it was getting published in a serialized manner. ধারাবাহিকভাবে বেরোচ্ছিল তো সবুজ পত্র পত্রিকাতে। 1322 বঙ্গাব্দ, 1915 থেকে 16 পর্যন্ত, আর 16 সালে ওটা বই হিসেবে পাবলিশ হয়, মানে বাংলা উপন্যাসটা। বাংলাটা জিজ্ঞাসা করছো তো?
হ্যাঁ, বাংলাটা জিজ্ঞেস করছি স্যার।
হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ, আর ইংরেজিটা 1919 সাল।
ওকে স্যার, থ্যাংক ইউ।
Okay, that was a rather interesting question. When was Ghare Baire published? Quickly coming back to the idea of love, of course, again,
Sir, one more question.
Yes, sure, go ahead.
Sir, what happens in the end of Ghare Baire, sir?
Sorry, as in?
As in, what happens in the end of Ghare Baire? Like, Nikhilesh friend, Shondeep Mukherjee, like, Bimala and Nikhilesh lives a happy and prosperous life together.
তুমি কি উপন্যাসটা পড়েছো?
হ্যাঁ স্যার, পড়েছি কিছুটা।
তোমার কি মনে হয় শেষটা কি হয়? তোমার কি মনে হয়?
স্যার, আমার মনে হয় যে মানে ফাইনালি,
ওইটা তো তোমরা জানো যে অমূল্য মারা গেল, অমূল্য গুলি খেয়ে অমূল্য মারা গেছে।
স্যার, আমার মনে হয় যে ফাইনালি নিখিলেশের যে বন্ধু সন্দীপ মুখার্জি, সে মানে যেই মানে সেই সময় তো একটা স্বদেশী মুভমেন্ট চলছিল, তো আমার মনে হয় ফাইনালি বিমলা আর নিখিলেশ একটা হ্যাপি আর একটা প্রসপারাস লাইফ একসাথে লিড করে।
প্রসপারাস মানে কি? তোমার নামটা একটু বলো না গো আমাকে, খুব ভালো একটা পয়েন্ট তুলেছো তুমি, তোমার নামটা একটু বলো আমাকে।
পৌর্ণমী স্যার, পৌর্ণমী।
তুমি আমাকে বলো তো যে একটা কনজুগাল লাইফের কথা বলছো, একটা দাম্পত্য জীবনে তুমি হ্যাপি এন্ড প্রসপারাস হ্যাপি কনজুগাল লাইফের কথাই বলছো নিশ্চয়ই তুমি, তাই তো? একটা সুখী দাম্পত্য জীবনের কথা বলছো তো? তো তোমার মতে কি মনে হয়? এটা খুব ইন্টারেস্টিং একটা পয়েন্ট। তোমার মতে কি মনে হয় একটা দাম্পত্য জীবন কি কি হলে একটা দাম্পত্য জীবন হ্যাপি এন্ড প্রসপারাস হয় বলে তোমার মনে হয়? তোমার কেন মনে হলো যে তাদের লাইফটা হ্যাপি এন্ড প্রসপারাস হবে?
স্যার, আন্ডারস্ট্যান্ডিং হলো ওদের মধ্যে, যে আন্ডারস্ট্যান্ডিংটা ছিল না।
ওকে ওকে,
মানে
একরকম ভাবে একে অপরকে বুঝতে পারলো, তাই তো? যেটা শুরুতে হয়তো বুঝতে পারছিল না,
বুঝতে পারছিল না। আর দুজনের মধ্যে যে স্পেসটা ছিল, যে গ্যাপটা ছিল, সেই গ্যাপটা অনেকটা আর কি ব্রেক হলো, অনেকটা কানেক্ট হলো দুজনের সাথে,
অনেকটা কাছাকাছি আসতে পারলো, তাই তো?
অনেকটা কাছাকাছি আসতে পারলো। ইয়েস।
Okay, brilliant. That is your reading of the novel. এই তো তুমি নিজেই উত্তরটা দিলে, তুমি তো নিজেই উত্তরটা দিলে, কি হলো? এবং তোমার কাছে তোমার
না,
উত্তরটাই ঠিক না,
I
কোনো
was not
একটা উত্তর
sure, sir.
সম্ভব না। না না, শিওর
I
হবার
was
কিছু নেই তো, শিওর হবার কিছু নেই তো। তোমার কাছে এটাই মনে হয়েছে, আমার কাছে আরেক রকম মনে হতে পারে। আমার কাছে মনে হতে পারে নিখিলেশ মারা যাবে, হতেই পারে আমার কাছে মনে হতে, অসুবিধা কি আছে। আর দেবকুমারের কাছে মনে হতে পারে যে না, সন্দীপ আবার ফিরে আসবে, মনে হতেই পারে। উপন্যাসটা
Yeah.
যেখানে শেষ হচ্ছে, রবীন্দ্রনাথ ইচ্ছা করেই এমন একটা জায়গায় শেষ করেন, যেটা ওই তোমরা ছোটবেলায় পড়েছিলে ছোট গল্প কাকে বলে, একটা সংজ্ঞা দিতে গিয়ে একটা জায়গায় আমরা পড়তাম, অন্তরে অতৃপ্তি রবে, সাঙ্গ করি মনে হবে, শেষ হয়ে হইল না শেষ। মনে আছে, পড়েছিলে ছোটবেলায় কখনো?
হ্যাঁ স্যার, মানে মিনিংটা আর কি
ওপেন
রিডার্সদেরকে
এন্ডেড
আর কি
সেটাকে
ছেড়ে
বলে।
দিল, মানে
হ্যাঁ,
রিডার্সদেরকে আর কি ছেড়ে দিল যে
এক্স্যাক্টলি।
তোমরা যেভাবে যেই পয়েন্ট অফ ভিউতে এবার গল্পটাকে ধরবে।
ইয়েস, ইয়েস, অ্যাবসলিউটলি। এটা সম্পূর্ণ তোমার স্বাধীনতা আছে, তুমি কিভাবে দেখতে চাও উপন্যাসটা শেষে কি হয়, তোমার
Okay.
তোমার উপর এটা। মানে এটা মানে মানে আমি ঠিক ভুল কোনোটাই বলতে পারবো না। তোমার একরকম করে মনে হলো, এটা তোমার মতন করে ঠিক, কোনো অসুবিধা নেই।
হ্যাঁ, মানে মানে রবীন্দ্রনাথ ঠাকুর আর কি এটাই আর কি এন্ডিংটা দিয়েছে, রাইট?
ওকে, ফাইন, ফাইন, অ্যাবসলিউটলি ফাইন, ফাইন। আমি এখানে বললাম যে আমার ঠিক ভুল বলার কোনো জায়গাই নেই। তোমার মনে হয়েছে এটা ঠিক, ব্যাস সেটাই ঠিক। তোমার ভার্সন অফ ঘরে বাইরেতে এটাই তাহলে, নো প্রবলেম। ঠিক আছে, আচ্ছা। আর কারোর কোনো প্রশ্ন আছে? একটুখানি চট করে আমরা একটু প্রশ্ন নিয়ে নিতে পারি, কারণ অনেকক্ষণ কথা বলছি তো, ঘ্যাচর ম্যাচর অনেকক্ষণ ধরে চলছে। সাবজেক্টিভিটি, নেশন, কনস্ট্রাকশন, কনস্ট্রাকটিভ নেশন, এসব অনেক খটোমটো কথা অনেকক্ষণ ধরে চলছে। কারোর কোনো যদি প্রশ্ন থাকে বলে নেবে। হ্যাঁ, নামটা খালি একটু বলে নেবে, নামটা একটু বলে নেবে।
My name is ভদ্র কল্যাণ, গ্রাজুয়েশন পাস করে গেছি। আমার নাম সুভদ্র কল্যাণ।
শুনতে পেলাম না বাবা, আরেকবার।
সুভদ্র কল্যাণ, কল্যাণ।
আচ্ছা, বল।
নেই, আমি জাস্ট জানাতে চাই যে আপনার লেকচার খুব ভালো লেগেছে, and it was completely new understanding that we could have developed from your lecture. আর আমাকে একটু যেতে হবে, ওই জন্য আমি আপনার পারমিশন দিচ্ছি, যদি আপনি আমাকে একটু এক্সকিউজ করেন। খুব ভালো লাগলো আপনার লেকচার। আমি আমার প্রফেসর, ডিপার্টমেন্টের প্রফেসরদের কাছ থেকে পারমিশন নিচ্ছি, যদি আমাকে একটু যেতে দেন আর কি। আমি সত্যি আমি জানতামও না আজকে লেকচারটা আছে। আমি কিছুক্ষণ আগে দেখলাম, আমি ঘরের বাইরে বলে ঢুকে পড়লাম, এবং আপনার লেকচারটা অসাধারণ লেগেছে আমার।
থ্যাংক ইউ সো মাচ, থ্যাংক ইউ সো মাচ, খুব ভালো থেকো। ওকে, হ্যাঁ, আর কারো কিছু জিজ্ঞাসা করার আছে? হ্যাঁ, কারো কিছু জিজ্ঞাসা করার আছে?
We are collecting the question, Ishanda. তুমি জাস্ট শেষ করে নাও, মানে দেন we will.
ফাইন, ওকে। সো আমার খুব কিছু বলার নেই, লাভের ক্ষেত্রে আমার খুব কিছু বলার আমার থাকবে না। তোমরা বুঝতেই পারছো যে both Nikhilesh, sort of all the three characters, Nikhilesh, Bimala, and by the way, I could not talk about Chandranath Babu at all because I have so little time and it's not possible to cram everything in just 1 hour 45 minutes or 1 hour whatever. As far as love is concerned, sexuality is concerned, what we have most strikingly, most ostensibly in the novel are the two images, the image of the fire and the image of the water, and they have been repeatedly used in the novel. Shondeep's association with fire, his fiery speech, etc. It has its seductive appeal, it has its sexual appeal. বিমলা, সে যেন মনে হচ্ছে তার চোখের সামনের চিকটা সে আর সহ্য করতে পারছে না, সে হাত দিয়ে সরিয়ে দিচ্ছে, এটসেট্রা। It's very different, it's very on your face as it were. বিভিন্ন ভাবে আগুনের ইমেজটা ফিরে ফিরে আসছে। বিমলার শাড়ির পাড়ে যে ওই যে গোল্ডেন কালারের যে সোনালী রঙের পাড়, তার মধ্যে সন্দীপ দেখছে যে তার ভেতরের ডিজায়ার, ইচ্ছে, কামনা, সে আগুনের মূর্তি ধরে তার পাকে পাকে তাকে ঘিরে ধরেছে। তার চুলের মধ্যে যে একটুখানি লাল ওই ফিতের আভাস দেখা যাচ্ছে, সেটাকে মনে হচ্ছে ঝড়ের রাঙা আভাস মনে হচ্ছে সেটাকে। সো a lot of destructive imagery of fire associated with overt sexuality, eros, eroticism, erotic attraction, erotic the characters, at least Bimala and Shondeep, they have been very deliberately and overtly eroticized as it were, in this novel. And this is something which many of the critiques or the contemporary readers found extremely offensive. And we have a very different version of love, a companionate, marriage, etc. এগুলো ক্লাসে তোমাদেরকে সব পড়ানো হবে, এগুলো আমার খুব একটা বলে আর এখানে আমি তোমাদের সময় নষ্ট করতে চাইছি না, এগুলো সব তোমাদেরকে ক্লাসে নিশ্চয়ই বলা হবে। যে Nikhilesh and this entire understanding of Tagore and love, that what reappears is the concept of truth pitted against illusion. I do not want illusion in any of its form, not in the form of nation, not in the form of a conjugal life, not in the form of gender performance. I mean, all these categories, in all of these categories, what each of these characters try to seek is truth, and they want to, or they have embarked on a journey of rejecting the illusion in the sphere of love, in the sphere of nation, in the sphere of conjugality, etc. Right? Nikhilesh, of course, wants Bimola to have her own choice, but that is also a choice which has been made by Nikhilesh. That is the important part of the novel. বিমলা সে তার মতন করে বেছে নিক, এই বেছে নেওয়াটাও মানে নিখিলেশ বিমলার হয়ে বেছে দেয়। It's not that Bimola who gets to say that, okay, now today I want to go out and today I want to make my own choice. It's not that. It is Nikhilesh who says that you should go out and you should make your choice, as it were, right? I have been imposed on you. I have veiled you. Therefore, you should go out into the world, Bahir. You should go out into the Bahir to find out what you exactly want. Anyway, so that's more or less about it. অনেক কথা বলা বাকিও রইলো, অনেক কথা বললাম, যা বললাম that is more than enough, I think, 1 ঘন্টার জন্য। এবার আমি একটুখানি দেবকুমারকে বলবো to take it forward, maybe. Yes, Devkumar, if people have questions, etc.
Okay, thank you. Just a minute. Thank you, Ishanda, for your beautiful deliberation. Actually, you begin with the context and the form of the text, especially the form of the narrative, and the way you compared it with Rajani and Sri Patro, and focused on the difference of the translation, especially the way you spoke about the home and the world, and the reception of the text, and Tagore's brand of nationalism, and the way you have pointed out several important points about the multiplicity of truth. It really provokes us to think about the current form of nationalism in a new light, I would say. And definitely, you have closed your argument with Tagore's version of extramarital affair, and the way he compartmentalized the images of mother and desired women. It's just brilliant, I would say. So thank you for your talk today. I would like to ask Swatidi now if there is any question. Swatidi, if you please take over.
Yeah, am I audible properly?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Chakraborti, for this brilliant lecture. I mean, this is a lecture that is at once and the same time critically informed and simple enough for the UG students to understand. And we all know how difficult this task is, but the way you dealt with it is outstanding. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And now is the time to turn this lecture into a discussion. So we may have questions from the students present here. I think we already have 2 questions here.
Yes.
One is from Obhirup Gupta, who's a first sem student, and he asks, sir, why is God put more emphasis than one's country to Rabindranath Tagore? I think he wanted to frame it like this: why has Tagore put more emphasis on God than
Yes,
his
yes, I get the question. একবারে সবকটা প্রশ্ন নিয়ে উত্তর দেব নাকি এক এক করে উত্তর দেব?
And the next one is by Shinchon Dasgupta.
Yes.
What makes the different perspectives represented in the novel different truths, quote unquote truths?
Okay.
The novel doesn't read like a dialectic, but as one that highlights the follies of one perspective. Okay. And its triumph over the other, where one character seems to be quite ostensibly the mouthpiece of the author himself. If the novel is then an effort to identify the truth and declare the rest as lies, then doesn't it stand in contrast with the multiplicity of truth that you had mentioned in the introduction? Okay. The third question is by Dipanita Roy Chaudhary, and she asks, Sir, as you were just stating that Nikhilesh can somehow be considered the mouthpiece of Tagore, and Nikhilesh did not support the act of burning goods, which can be considered a symbol of Swadeshi movement. Although it will be unfair to state that Tagore was against the Swadeshi movement or the symbolism, he just stressed on constructive outcome rather destruction of something. Yet Tagore himself returned his knighthood after the Jallianwala Bagh massacre as a symbol of the protest against the British Raj. So isn't it contradictory somehow? So these are the three questions we have so far.
Just প্রথম প্রশ্নটা আরেকবার একটু শুনতে পারি? Just first question.
প্রথম প্রশ্ন হচ্ছে why has Tagore put more emphasis on God than one's country?
Now, we will have to, if you want a real answer of this question, we'll have to go back to Tagore's upbringing, right? Tagore was getting he was brought up in this culture of where he was reading a lot of Upanishads. He had his own spiritual understanding, and and if you just read Tagore and his exchange with Gandhi, you will see both of them are converging at one very important point, that both of them are focusing on truth. Both of them are focusing on truth. It is very interesting how Tagore, for example, Janagana Mano is the poem that I was referring to, where he says Bharata Bhagya Vidhata. That is the one with a capital O that Tagore is putting a lot of emphasis on. He's saying that it is my spiritual growth which finally will decide, the spiritual growth of the people will finally decide the fate of India, or fate of Bharat, of Bharatbarsha, as Tagore calls it in his novels, in his lectures. Therefore, Tagore is not willing to worship his nation. Tagore is clearly not willing to worship his nation. What Tagore is instead willing to worship is his god, Devota. Devota is I would not say more important. What I would say is, Tagore says, I am going to worship my god, my Devota, and it is my father, let my father let my country awake. It is the Bharata Bhagya Vidhata who is going to জাগ্রত করবে, ভারতকে জাগ্রত করবে, তার অচৈতন্য অবস্থা থেকে, তার চেতনাহীনতা থেকে ভারতকে জাগ্রত করবে. What he is focusing on is spiritual nationalism. What he is focusing on is a spiritual growth of the people, as it were. That's number one. Number two, the second question is rather verbose, but very interesting. Clearly, we have a mouthpiece. And then why am I saying that we have multiple truths? We have various versions, as it were, but Tagore is clearly favoring one narrative. Tagore is clearly taking sides with Nikhilesh. Tagore is clearly holding up the truth of Nikhilesh. Then why am I saying that there are many truths? Is really Tagore doing that? Then why did Nikhilesh fail in his rural reconstruction projects? Nikhilesh failed in his rural reconstruction projects. Bimala does not believe in the rural reconstruction project. Shondeep, does he stop or does he get changed at the end of the novel? I don't think so. He finishes his work here and he goes out somewhere else to continue with his work. What we have is various versions of the same idea, and all the characters think that this is the truth. The truth with which Nikhilesh started his journey, the truth that Bimala had in front of her, is not the truth, is not exactly the truth that she returns to. Bimala does not return to the truth proposed by, held up by Nikhilesh. It has gone through her understanding of, or Shondip's understanding of truth. Shondip's understanding of truth vis-a-vis nation. যেটা দুটো প্রশ্ন আলাদা, একটা হচ্ছে অনেকগুলো সত্য তুলে ধরা হয়েছে, হ্যাঁ অনেকগুলো সত্য তুলে ধরা হয়েছে, সত্যের বিভিন্ন ভার্সন, বিভিন্ন রূপকে তুলে ধরা হয়েছে বিভিন্ন পার্সপেক্টিভ থেকে, দ্যাটস ওয়ান। 2 নম্বর, রবীন্দ্রনাথ সবকটা সত্যকে সাপোর্ট করেন না, রবীন্দ্রনাথ একটি সত্যকে সাপোর্ট করেন। রবীন্দ্রনাথ ক্লিয়ারলি সাইডস উইথ ওয়ান পার্সপেক্টিভ। তোমার দুটো প্রশ্ন এক জায়গায় মিলে গেছে, সিনজনকে আমি এটা বলছি যে তোমার দুটো প্রশ্ন এক জায়গায় মিলে গেছে, দুটো প্রশ্ন কিন্তু আলাদা। একটা হচ্ছে ভার্সন অনেকগুলো আমাদের কাছে অ্যাভেলেবল, অনেকগুলো ভার্সন অফ দ্য ট্রুথস আমাদের সামনে রেখে দেওয়া হয়, এটাও 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 অনেকগুলো রেখে দেওয়া হয় এবং প্রত্যেক কটা নিয়েই ডিসকাশন চলে। কিন্তু রবীন্দ্রনাথ কি কোনো একটিকে বিশেষ গুরুত্ব দিচ্ছেন? হ্যাঁ, রবীন্দ্রনাথ একটিকে বিশেষ গুরুত্ব দিচ্ছেন ডেফিনেটলি, কিন্তু সেই একটি সেই ওই যেটা দিয়ে শুরু হয়েছিল সেটা নয়, ওই একটিটা সবকটা নিয়ে একটা কিছু, কারণ সম্পূর্ণরূপে কিন্তু ডিসকার্ডেড হয়ে গেল না। মানে সন্দীপ ইজ নট ডিলিটেড, সন্দীপ ইজ নট obliterated as it were, সন্দীপ রিমেইনস ইন দ্য টেক্সট, ভেরি মাচ ইন দ্য টেক্সট। যেভাবে নিখিলেশ ফিরে আসে, যেভাবে অমূল্য ফিরে আসে, যেভাবে দাঁড়িয়ে থাকে বিমলা, তো সন্দীপের ট্রুথ কমপ্লিটলি মুছে ফেলা হলো টেক্সট থেকে, সন্দীপ আর কোথাও নেই, দ্য টেক্সট হ্যাজ বিকাম ভেরি নিট অ্যান্ড ক্লিন অ্যাজ ইট ওয়ার, তা তো নয়, স্যানিটাইজ করা হয়নি তো টেক্সটটাকে। ওকে, দ্যাটস নাম্বার 2। নাম্বার 3 কোয়েশ্চেনটা একটা আরেকবার রিপিট করা যাবে?
এই প্রশ্নটা দীপান্বিতা করেছে। Sir, as you were just stating that Nikhilesh can somehow be considered the mouthpiece of Tagore, and Nikhilesh did not support the act of burning goods, which can be considered a symbol of Swadeshi movement. Although it will be unfair to state that Tagore was against
knighthood ফিরিয়ে দেওয়ার কথাটা জিজ্ঞেস করছি।
হ্যাঁ, knighthood ফিরিয়ে দেওয়ার কথাটা।
হ্যাঁ, না মানে বার্নিং অফ ফরেন গুডস কেন নিখিলেশ পছন্দ করেনি, কেন রবীন্দ্রনাথ পছন্দ করেনি? কারণ কি, এটা তো একেবারে গরিব মানুষের উপর, সে সমস্ত গরিব যারা মানে যারা ওই মুটে, যারা মাথায় করে ওই সমস্ত কাপড়ের বোঝা নিয়ে ঘরে ঘরে বাড়ি বাড়ি বিক্রি করতে বেরোয়, যারা বিক্রেতা, সেই সমস্ত গরিব বিক্রেতাদের পেটে গিয়ে আঘাত করছিল এই বার্নিং অফ ফরেন গুডস। এটা তো কোয়ার্সিভ একটা অ্যাক্টিভিটি, তাদেরকে দিয়ে জোর করে তাদের কাপড় টেনে, তাদেরকে টেনে এনে ছিঁড়ে সব ফেলে দেওয়া হচ্ছিল, পুড়িয়ে ফেলা হচ্ছিল। তাদের আক্ষরিক অর্থে পরবার কিছু ছিল না, কারণ কি হোমমেড ক্লোথস ওয়ার এক্সট্রিমলি এক্সপেন্সিভ, দে ওয়ার নট চিপ, এবং তাদের মানে প্রত্যেকের এই ক্ষমতা ছিল না, তারা যদি নিজেদের পোশাকটা ফরেন ক্লোথ যেটা তারা পরে রয়েছে যদি পুড়িয়ে ফেলতো, তাদের অ্যাকচুয়ালি পরবার কিছু থাকতো না, মানে এইরকম দারিদ্র ছিল। কিন্তু সেখানে তার সঙ্গে নাইটহুড ফিরিয়ে দেওয়াটা একদম একেবারে অন্যরকম একটা জেস্চার, এবং সেটা বিষয়টা ইমিডিয়েট জেস্চার। মানে অতগুলো মানুষকে মানে নির্বিচারে গুলি করে মারা হলো, এবং এইরকম একটা অ্যাট্রসিটি, সেটাকে ইমিডিয়েটলি রেজিস্ট করবার জন্য রবীন্দ্রনাথের কাছে এছাড়া আপাতত আর কোনো উপায় রবীন্দ্রনাথ দেখতে মানে হাতের কাছে পাননি, এবং ইট ওয়াজ আ ভেরি ইমিডিয়েট, ভেরি ইমোশনাল, ভেরি প্যাশনেট ডিসিশন। ওকে, আর কিছু প্রশ্ন?
আর কোনো প্রশ্ন আপাতত চ্যাট বক্সে নেই। কেউ যদি
বলতে চাও বলতে পারো।
সিনচন আরেকটা প্রশ্ন করেছে। Is
Hello.
then according to Tagore?
Hello.
Ponami, can we just finish and come back to you?
Yeah, ma'am. Sorry.
Is then according to Tagore, Nikhilesh's failure not reflective in any way of a flaw in his philosophy, but the limitations of the world to perceive and acknowledge it?
Tagore was clearly stating that this version of nationalism, that is, which is against devotional religious nationalism, the version of nationalism which is pitted against the militant religious devotional nationalism, the context was not yet ready. The country was not yet ready to accept that. এবং কেন এটা মানে ফেল করলো, সবাই টিটকিরি দিল, সবাই ব্যঙ্গ করলো, খবরের কাগজে ব্যঙ্গ বেরোলো, ওনাকে নিয়ে ছড়া কাটা হলো এটসেট্রা, ব্যঙ্গ করে নিখিলেশকে নিয়ে বলা হচ্ছে। Tagore was very well aware of the fact that this is a nationalism for which the country is not prepared. Eta Obhisharika, I repeat that image again. Eta Obhisharika, as Bimala says, Eta Obhisharika desh, Vaishnav Padokortaদের দেশ। একটা কোথা থেকে একটা ডাক শুনেছে, সে ছুটে বেরিয়ে পড়েছে। Okay. হ্যাঁ, someone was asking something.
Poonami.
Yes, sir. I do have a question. How do Nikhilesh and Sandeep differ in the idea of Swadeshi? Like,
What do
what
you
was
think?
their...
তোমার কি মনে হয়? তোমার কি মনে হয়?
Sir, আমি ওটাতে quite blank বলতে পারেন, মানে আমি খুব
বুঝতে
মানে
পারোনি, তাই তো? আচ্ছা, আমি এই যে কথা বললাম তার থেকে খুব একটা কিছু বোঝা গেল না। আচ্ছা, যেটা হলো সেটা হচ্ছে কিছুই না, স্বদেশীর মধ্যে তো একটা কোয়ার্শন ছিল, একটা জোর করে কাপড় কেড়ে এনে পুড়িয়ে দেওয়া, গরিব মানুষ যারা ব্যবসা করছে তাদের যে মানে বস্ত্রের ভান্ডার সেটা টেনে এনে আগুন জ্বালিয়ে দেওয়া, এরকম একটা ব্যাপার তো ছিল। এইটা রবীন্দ্রনাথ মেনে নিতে পারেননি। জোর করে করিয়ে নেওয়া এইটা রবীন্দ্রনাথের একেবারেই, রবীন্দ্রনাথ সেটাকে সমর্থন করতে পারেন।
পছন্দ হয়নি
এইটা, এই ধরনের স্বদেশী রবীন্দ্রনাথ যেটা প্রায় ডিস্ট্রাকটিভ, তাই না? এটা তো ধ্বংস করার কাজে লাগছে, এটা তো গড়ে তোলবার কাজে কিছু লাগছে না। সেইটা শুধুমাত্র ধ্বংস, শুধুমাত্র বিপ্লব। এটা I think in an essay called আত্মপরিচয়, this is what Tagore says. শুদ্ধ বিপ্লব, শুদ্ধ ভাঙন কখনো কল্যাণকর হতে পারে। তার সঙ্গে সঙ্গে ডেফিনেটলি গড়ে তোলা, সৃজন, সৃষ্টি করা লাগবে। এবং সেই সৃষ্টি করাটা কি? সৃষ্টি করার কথা রুরাল রিকনস্ট্রাকশনের যে ভার্সন অফ স্বদেশী, সেইটার কথা কে বলছেন? বলছেন নিখিলেশ।
Okay. And so, no, sir, I got it right now. Thank you very much, sir. And so, who can we call the protagonist of Ghare Baire? Is it Nikhilesh? Is it Nikhilesh?
শুধু কি নিখিলেশ? শুধু নিখিলেশ?
I think Sandeep was also a part, but I think more Nikhilesh, I guess. Because he was to the end.
বিমলার কি হলো? This is also a story of Bimala. By the way, এটা যারা মানে এটা খুব ইন্টারেস্টিং। বিমলার 7টা আত্মকথা আছে, নিখিলেশের 7টা আত্মকথা আছে, সন্দীপের 4টে আত্মকথা আছে। এটা একটা ইন্টারেস্টিং একটা, আমি দেখছিলাম, এটা খেয়াল করে দেখছিলাম, এটা খুব ইন্টারেস্টিং। বিমলা 7 বার বলে, নিখিলেশ 7 বার বলে, সন্দীপ 4 বার বলে। হ্যাঁ, it's also an autobiography of Bimala. It's an autobiography of Nikhilesh. It's also an autobiography of
Shondip.
Yes.
Okay.
All of them are the protagonists, I believe. একটা protagonist থাকতে হবে, তার কি মানে আছে?
না স্যার, একদমই। Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Someone has a question. Someone has raised a hand, I believe.
So can we say that there is an erotic love between Vimala and Nikhilesh?
Erotic love between Bimala and Nikhilesh. Mane they are husband-wives. It's a conjugal relationship. And it is not without its share of eroticism. নিশ্চয়ই আছে, মানে ওই কবি ওই মশাল টশালের ইমেজটা যদি দেখো, কালো আগুন, কালো শিখা, খোঁপাটাকে বলা হচ্ছে এবং ঘাটটাকে বলা হচ্ছে সেই মশাল, এটসেট্রা। ইরোটিক ওভারটোন তো ডেফিনেটলি আছে এবং পুরোটার মধ্যেই আছে। একটি চুম্বন রেখে দিচ্ছে বিমলার কপালে গিয়ে নিখিলেশ, মানে if you want the ostensible marks of erotic play out, as it were, they are of course there in the novel.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
As of now কোনো প্রশ্ন নেই আমার মনে। আর কি কেউ প্রশ্ন করবেন বা তোমরা কেউ করবে? আমার মনে হয় আর কারোর কোনো প্রশ্ন নেই।
ওকে, তো ওয়ান্ডারফুল। আমি খুব খুশি হব, আমার নিজের খুব ভালো লাগবে যদি আমি জানতে পারি যে এই ডিসকাশনটা তোমাদের কতটুকুও কাজে লেগেছে। if it has helped you in the bit, তোমাদের পরীক্ষার জন্য, তোমাদের পরীক্ষার বাইরেও তো একটা পড়াশোনা থাকে, সেটা আমরা ভুলে গেছি, আমরা তো এখন আর সেটা মাথায় রাখি না, আমাদের পরীক্ষা ঘিরেই আমাদের পড়াশোনাটা। এই কারণে যখন আমাকে দেবকুমার প্রথম অ্যাপ্রোচ করলো আমি দেবকুমারকে বললাম এমন একটা কিছু আমি পড়াতে চাইবো যেটা যেটা ওদের সিলেবাসে আছে, কারণ সেটা তাহলে শুনতে ভালো লাগবে, ইন্টারেস্ট পাবে। তো তোমাদের পরীক্ষার কাজে যদি এতটুকুও লাগে তোমরা নিশ্চয়ই আমি খুব খুশি হব। তোমরা তনিকা সরকারের একটা এসে পড়তে পারো, এসেটার নাম হচ্ছে মেনি ফেসেস অফ লাভ, এটা বোধহয় ইন্টারনেটে পাওয়া যায়। আর তপব্রত ঘোষের যে এসেটার কথা আমি বারবার রেফার করছিলাম সেটা হচ্ছে দ্য ফর্ম অফ দ্য হোম অ্যান্ড দ্য ওয়ার্ল্ড, এটাও ইন্টারনেটে অ্যাভেলেবল। এটা খুব ভালো এসে, তোমরা নিজেরা পড়ে দেখতে পারো। এর মধ্যে আমি যা যা কথা বললাম তার অনেক কিছুই এর মধ্যে পাবে, এবং আরো কিছু অতিরিক্ত কিছুও পাবে যেটা তোমাদের পরে হয়তো কাজে লাগতে পারে। থ্যাংক ইউ।
ঈশানদা, স্টিল আমরা তোমাকে ফর্মালি একটা থ্যাঙ্কস দিতে চাই, and for that I would like to request our senior colleague, our Aparajita Guha madam,
Okay.
to thank to give the vote of thanks.
নমস্কার ম্যাডাম, আপনার সঙ্গে আলাপ হতে পারলো না। থ্যাংক ইউ সো মাচ for being such a patient listener.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are.
On behalf of the Department of English, Vijaygarh Jyotish Ray College, I would like to present the vote of thanks. I take this golden opportunity to thank our respected principal, Madam Dr. Rajyashree Niyogi, for attending the discussion series and encouraging us in our endeavors. I extend my gratitude to our head of the department, Dr. Ronobil Lahiri, for staying with us and inspiring us. I thank Professor Dandapat for his introduction of our honored speaker, Professor Ishan Chakroborti. We are really honored to have Professor Chakraborti with us. His eloquent, thought-provoking speech on the call of truth, love, gender, and nation in Rabindranath Tagore's Ghare, Baire has enriched us. We express our heartfelt thanks to him for his valuable contribution. I thank my esteemed colleagues and dear students for being with us through the discussion series and make it a success. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. So with this, we may end today's program. Thank you, everybody.
Namaskar.